Hello to the special edition of the VR Untethered podcast, where we are interviewing Joe Strout, one of the developers of Ilysia, the upcoming MMORPG game from Team 21. He has been a developer on the Go and the VR platforms before. He developed Beatron. He was behind the port of Quiver to the Oculus Go, and he's been a member of our Discord for a while as well. So he is always welcome here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How you doing, Joe?
Doing great. I'm happy to be here.
Right. So, obviously, you are in the last push to that 100,000 goal on the Kickstarter for the game. I believe you said earlier it's probably going to end in like a week or so, and then you guys are going to just go to deep diving in to developing.
That's right.
So that's got to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, there's 7 days to go. The Kickstarter goal was 60K, but we got that within a few days of launch, and now we're heading towards 100K, which is nice because honestly, 60K was a bare minimum to develop this kind of game. And a lot of people, on Reddit were very skeptical that anyone could develop a MMO for so little. And they have a valid point. 100K is a little more comfortable.
Yeah.
Even more would give us room to do a little bit more before launch.
Yeah.
I would expect as much overhead as you could get is what you would need, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, we want to have professional artwork. We've already got an amazing sound and music guy, but he would probably like to get paid for his efforts.
Yes.
There's a lot of people involved in something like this.
Yeah.
No room for just the independent developer anymore on major projects. Right?
Not on a project of this scale, no.
Yeah, it looks like it's been growing in scale all the time. You added new life forms too. I was reading some new races. I think I'd added in.
New races. Yep, that's right. So the game has been in development since before I joined the team, which was in the spring of this year. It had been in development for maybe a year before that, and they've been very open with their backers. They have a Discord server with thousands of users, and they've been presenting builds that people could load with SideQuest or just run on PC VR as they go, showing different incarnations of the game. Initially, they were sort of standalone demos showing one thing or another. After I joined the team, we started bringing that all together and building a pre-alpha that was more of a complete game. It had magic, health, combat, items, that sort of thing, and a slightly larger world. Let's see, that world is about 3 by 3 kilometers in scale. So it's all, it's all gone really well. But in sort of the race to get to the Kickstarter and have enough of a demo ready to convince people that we can really do this, we did have to take some shortcuts and cut some corners. So I'm excited to go back and lay a really firm foundation and do everything properly so that it's going to be really solid and reliable for the final game.
What kind of time frame are you looking for on the final game?
Well, we're looking to launch the first alpha in probably 4 months, and for the official release, 10 to 12 months.
Okay.
So it'll be next fall.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine if you tried to rush it, it would just be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to rush things.
Nope.
No, rushing to the finish line somehow doesn't seem to work for most games.
Yeah.
Then you get updates and patches and updates and patches, and hope you don't lose everybody before you even get off the ground running.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So we appreciate that you guys are taking their time and doing it right and not rushing to market too much. So always appreciated. So I had a question for you here. You have had some successful Go and Gear VR games in the past, and are now working with Team 21 on this. It's got to be pretty different in some significant ways. It's developing for the Quest, developing an RPG, as opposed to the more solo player games or very small multiplayer games that you worked on before. So what just stands out as some of the most significant differences?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with the MMO is dealing with the number of players, and there are certain resources, especially network bandwidth, and how that scales with the number of players. That if you take a standard approach to networking, it scales at an alarming rate when you get up above 20 or 30 simultaneous players, which is why most match-based games are 10 or fewer. Because once you get beyond that, if they're all talking to a central server, you're really hammering that server. And we want to be able to support hundreds of simultaneous players. So so we've designed a new way of doing the networking, which is mostly peer-to-peer. When you're in the world, even though it's a single world for everybody, you can't actually see most people at once because they're in some other part of the world.
Right.
And so there's a manager that's aware of that, and it'll split people off into little groups of people that can see each other. And those clients will be talking peer-to-peer. Rather than going through a central server for most things. There's still some things that you need a central server for, like messaging and so on. But this is how we're going to get around the exponential explosion of network bandwidth that is otherwise required. And so that's been a lot of fun. It took a real shift in my thinking because the approaches I've used in something like Quiver Vanguard just wouldn't work here.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that kind of reminds a little bit of how Orbis handles that problem. That they do the shards, and you can be on one shard or the other, basically one server or the other, and it kind of randomly assigned that you can switch over. But I think isn't quite as robust as what you are to describe what would be.
Yeah. I think that this is going to work better than multiple servers and sharding, which is another way to go. And it's kind of the more common approach, but I think this is going to work great. And I'm going to be actually prototyping that in the next few weeks. And I don't know, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring some of our backers, our user base, in to help load test it once we have a prototype up and running, because I want to make sure it's really solid. And in the past, those people have always been really great at helping us test and understanding, when there's problems, because discovering the problems is kind of the whole point of testing.
Right. The load testing seems to be something that you would have to do because I don't even understand really how you guys are able to make more than 10 people do actions simultaneously on the screen.
It's magic.
Yeah, it really sort of is because, I'll just give you a small example. Josh and I were playing Swords of Gargantua, and I would lay an object down and see it in one place, and he would see that object in a different place, close to it, but in a different spot.
And whoever picked it up first had the real one.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing that can happen, because in any multiplayer game, there have to be some cheats happening behind the scenes. We can't sync everything all the time. And so it's all about trying to do cheats that the players won't notice.
Right.
In order to get that network bandwidth down. And it sounds like you guys found a case where you noticed.
Yeah.
They took a shortcut and you caught them at it.
Yeah.
which, you know, is almost always going to happen if you're specifically looking for it. But the hope is that under normal play, nobody ever notices because it's close enough.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this happened in the lobby, so we weren't actually in the midst of action. But yes,
Well,
while we were in the lobby
actually,
just talking.
If I remember right, it was like after we had beaten an enemy, but we hadn't moved to the next stage. We were still talking afterwards. And, you know, he was, "Where's my sword?"
Funny that. So I can't even imagine how you take care of that many cheats for so many people. I mean,
yeah, this is actually something that came up in our pre-alpha testing fairly often, where one person wouldn't see an object at all that the other person thought they were holding. And I'd be like, you don't see me holding a sword? No, I see you waving an empty hand around.
Right.
Right.
And,
that's happened in other games.
Yeah. So that's going to be, you know, high on the list of things to really plan for as we enter this next phase of development, and try to make it so that is, you know, extremely rare, if not just impossible to happen.
And it's got to be pretty difficult to balance supporting as many different devices as you are. The Quest and the Rift and the Vive.
Yeah.
I mean, I am beta testing Onward right now because they recruited a group of the players at beta test, and there was a situation just yesterday where there was a hole in the map that a Vive user could see. I could not see it. He dropped his gun into the hole. It vanished off the map. I saw it hit the ground. I picked it back up and I handed it to him. And to him, it was like magic, because poof, I've got a gun in my hand.
Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in Unity, it's not too hard to support multiple platforms, because it's all just one code base. It runs everywhere. The biggest nuisance is the different controllers. They all have different buttons and triggers and things, and we have to figure out how to make the controls work in a sensible way for all of them.
That's what I was going to say, was the bindings seem to really mess up some players or give them superpowers. I'm in one beta test now where somebody using a Vive is able to fly by just lifting off the ground and taking off, as opposed to dropping down from a height. They're able to literally be Neo from Matrix and just play the Superman part. And it's all because he couldn't get his bindings right. You know, there he was complaining, and the next thing you know, he's Superman. So
right.
Kind of
And the ability on the Vive to rebind your controller, that's got to be a wild card at times.
Yeah, and there's also a cheat available on Vive that tells the system that you're moving within your play space hundreds of meters away from the original point. And most games will just say, okay, I guess that's how he's really moved, so we have to move his viewpoint in the game the same way. And this actually enables people to fly around a lot of games, including our pre-alpha, by using this cheat. So it's on our to-do list now to watch for that and smack them down if they're trying to apply that.
Say, wait a second, you just moved 500 meters in real life in 1 second? No, I don't think so.
That's right. If you really have a football field sized play area, well, more power to you, but we may not support all of that.
If only, that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I wish I had a play area that big.
I would settle for 12 by 12, and I would be in heaven. That would be mine.
I've actually got a pretty big space in my garage. It's our workout area, but it's a comfy place to do VR too, with the Quest, which is wireless. Obviously, I can't use my Vive out there,
right?
But for Quest, it's great, except during the summer when it's too hot.
Yeah, so that's when you need to set up a lot of fans around you, so to simulate the air blowing on you in the game.
Sure.
Yeah, incorporate that too. That'll be easy. So it really does sound like just the more you want to incorporate and the more detail you want to put into the game, just the heavier the load gets for processing.
Yeah, that's right. And the Quest is really tightly constrained, as was the Go. Quest is a little more powerful. Quest 2 is even more so. But then the Quest 2, of course, requires 90 frames per second instead of 72, and it's a higher resolution screen. So I don't think it's going to amount to feeling more powerful from my point of view as a developer. So yeah, we have to make sure that we're minimizing the draw calls, minimizing the amount of processing that we do, so that we never drop a frame. And it's really hard.
Yeah.
The artists want to just keep throwing in all these fancy objects with tons of polygons and high-res textures, and
of course they do.
yeah, dangly physics bits, and they look gorgeous, but we just can't afford to have too many of those things on screen at once. So we're going to have to be disciplined and decide what, make sure each object gets just the resources that it really needs, and not more than it needs.
Yeah.
I was surprised at some of the detail they're able to bring into some of the games on the Quest, like when the lightning flashes in one of the games and you see the glass show the flash from and it's just like, wait, how are they doing this? This is just not
It's
possible.
tricks. Yeah. It's all tricks.
I know, but they're great tricks,
I know, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. And I don't mind being fooled by them one little bit, as long as
I agree.
enjoy them at it. It's, please, that's why I bought it, optically lose me,
Yeah. There's a technique that some games use where they pre-render an extremely high-res detailed environment from a certain point of view. And they render it into a bunch of little billboards that are stacked around you at varying spaces so that you can move your head a bit and things look okay. You can't move very far, but as long as you're, in a relatively small space, it's extremely convincing. And it looks like,
what was the name of that game? There was that game on the VR, the Go, that did a similar thing where you're moving on rails through a dungeon and you encounter a dragon at the end of it and whatnot. And
I don't think I ever saw that one.
It was I think it was done in Unreal Engine, and it was highly rendered, but it was only from that fixed perspective with just a few degrees of head motion allowed. So it sounds like a very similar technique.
Yeah, there's tricks like that, but it's hard to apply a lot of those tricks in a world like ours, which is an open world, like Ilysia, which is an open world. You can explore anywhere, and you don't even have to stay at ground level. We've promised flying mounts, so that really limits the number of tricks I can do, and pretty much I have to model everything exactly, as it appears to be.
Right.
That must be very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, I don't really understand still how you managed to do that. And just briefly, one of the things that I had done early on was I worked with compression 20 years ago, getting, streaming video down to an art. And it's tough. And yeah, we used to have to pull tricks a lot, especially with moving objects. Some of them just had to stay still to make other objects appear, better. So I appreciate what you have to put into it. My big thing is just that everything I've ever done is from a single perspective. And what you're doing is from so many perspectives at the same time. I can't imagine the size of the bag of tricks you carry.
Yeah.
I picture Felix the cat with a hernia trying to carry that bag of tricks.
No, he's got a Dungeons and Dragons bag of holding that has all of his tricks in.
All the tricks are in there.
Yeah.
Now I get it.
Yeah.
I was curious what you can tell us about the game and the world and all that stuff that has not already been perhaps overshared
yeah,
in other interviews.
That's kind of tough because the principals of Team 21, Art and Xander, they tend to overshare, I think.
Yeah.
So, if you read through the Kickstarter page, they go into a lot of detail about all the features that they're thinking about putting in, and there's not much omitted. I personally would have preferred if they left a little bit more to mystery, but they've kind of just laid it all out there because that's their style. They've always been very open with their plans from the beginning. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I can't off the top of my head think of anything that isn't already published.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I wasn't sure if there was anything that hadn't already been spoken about. So I was honestly curious about that.
Yeah.
So,
go
sounds like
ahead.
they set the bar very high, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
oversharing to that degree. They haven't left much room for you to say, wait a second.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that just prevents leaks. If you've already got everything out there,
That's right. What's the leak?
Anything.
That's right.
As you have been developing the game and working in your role on it, what stands out to you as something surprising, either about the game or the development of it, or that's something that you were either just not expecting, or something that was like extremely satisfying to you that you weren't expecting to be satisfying?
Well, I think maybe I'll mention the gesture-based magic system. That was kind of my baby, and I was inspired by Wizards for Quest, which is a great game. I just wanted to take it a little bit further, and you know, my approach to VR is, or my general philosophy about VR is that it should feel like you're really there and you're actually doing things with your hands, and, you know, obviously moving your head and so forth. I don't want to just take standards that have been applied on flat screen games and just move them into VR. So when they said, you know, we need some kind of spellcasting system, they were originally thinking, you know, pick your spells from a menu and press a button to cast or something.
Just like in Skyrim.
Yeah. And I said, well, you know, can we try this other gesture-based system? And so I developed a way of recognizing gestures, you know, based on where each hand begins and ends and which way the palm is facing and whether you're open or closed. And so you can make a fist and thrust it up into the air and you get one spell, and, you know, make two fists and kind of smack the ground and you get a neat ground effect spell. There's a shield spell, which I stole straight out of Wizards because it's such a good gesture for summoning a shield. And so that was a lot of fun to do, and I think it's been really effective. And the response from the pre-alpha testers was enthusiastic too. We even have a dart spell, which, you know, I love magic missile in Dungeons and Dragons. It's so simple and so versatile. And so it was one of the first things I did. You just make a pointy finger, go like this, you know, up and down, and you get basically a laser pointer to help you aim, and then you pull the trigger to fire missiles. And
it's got like what, 3 to 5 shots, and then you run out of mana and have to do it again or whatever.
Yeah, exactly right. And you can imagine at higher levels, you could get more shots per cast.
Right.
But it's super simple and really fun. And it's easy to hit your target with it, which fits, you know, to me fits the lore. You know, in D&D, magic missile can't miss. And with this, you could miss, but you'd have to really be, you know,
trying,
boning it in. Yeah.
And what I like about that one is, just to put it out there, I'm in the Kickstarter, so I've done some of the alpha.
You've done some of the tests, great.
Yeah. What I like about that one is that was one that I didn't have to have taught to me or read about in the Discord beforehand. I came across it naturally, you know, and I'm like, oh, I've got a laser pointer. Oh, it's shooting out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was discoverable.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones are not
discoverable than the ice spell or the shield, or
Yep. For those, we're going to have to put in some NPCs that, you know, show you how to do each one or something if you want to go down the spellcaster path. And we have had some users complain that some of them are too hard to do. But I think that's just a matter of refining the gesture recognizer. I think we can get it right.
I have noticed that some of them are a little physically uncomfortable. Like it feels like you got to go like, or whatever at times, but that could just be because the IK of the character model in the test that I've done haven't quite been spot on yet, and that throws you off.
Yeah, and actually one of the less pleasant surprises I've run into is every platform, every different VR hardware has a different idea about what orientation the controllers are at.
Yeah.
You'd think that the industry could have gotten together and standardized this is X, Y, and Z. But no, they haven't.
Yeah.
And so
I know exactly what you mean. When I play Vive games using virtual desktop, my hand in real life is like this, but my hand in the game is like that.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
and
so
it's
I wanna
maddening.
Shoot a gun, and I've got to
Yeah, so we have code in there to compensate for that with each of the controllers that we have to test with, which is most of them.
Yeah.
But it's very fiddly because there's no definitive answer, and so we have to tweak it. And it was something that we were constantly doing, like the last day before one of those pre-alpha tests, because I tend to test on Quest, so that's always good. Some of the other guys tend to test with Vive, I think, but then you get into like Windows WMR or
Right.
Rift or something, and we don't use those as often, and then we discover that in game, your hand is like this or something.
Yeah.
And that when that's off, that makes some of the spells like really hard to do.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I would imagine that's sort of like having a gun pointing up like this, but you want to shoot it straight this way. And that happened once again.
It's like what was
Solaris.
happening with you and Echo.
Yeah. Oh, with
the
me and Echo.
controllers.
I know the controllers were off by a little bit because of the way that the grips were held, which made the entire thing just off balance, and I was unconsciously moving my hands to compensate for it. So.
Yeah, it's a real pain, and it's something that I wish Unity would correct for us, but they don't either, so we just have to deal with it.
Yeah,
you are right. A simple XYZ would seem to be something that the industry would have to adopt in order to be able to, especially as we get more into hand tracking.
Yeah. Speaking of, if hand tracking ever gets more stable and more reliable, do you think it would have a place in the game, or?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are certainly people that have asked for it. I'm a little skeptical, I'll be honest. It seems gimmicky to me. I mean, we think about all the controls you have on two controllers. There's one for locomotion.
Right.
The other one is pointing and grabbing. Maybe you could just use an empty hand for that. But it's hard to see how, especially for locomotion, how you could replace that unless you're, using some fancy treadmill or something.
Right. I wouldn't mind using that, but they currently cost too much.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's the socks on the slippy disc one, but I've tried that and I don't find it very convincing. So yeah, I don't know. Down the road, who can say? But initially, I find the controller a better interface than just empty hands.
Right. You're talking about 10 different inputs that you have on the controller, and a couple of which can be used in multiple variations as opposed to the squeezy thing. Yeah. It's always fun to use your Quest and go.
Right.
Yeah, they have to do something more. I agree, but I don't see how they could overcome the motion unless it becomes one of those running things. You have to look at that.
I just had to ask because there's gonna be someone out there that is wondering. So, locomotion is one of the biggest issues with the hand tracking is how do you do locomotion?
Right. Yeah. Now, where I think the hand tracking really is going to be useful is in AR. When we've all got magic glasses on and we're manipulating things in the real world, you probably won't have a controller handy.
Right.
So then it makes sense to, grab things with the pinch and move them around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you're playing a game in VR, you're already got something strapped to your head, so it's really no extra burden to pick up a couple of controllers.
Right.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because I had gotten Waltz of the Wizard knowing it was going to be the first one to get hand tracking, and it is gimmicky. It's fun, but it's gimmicky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they do have a locomotion solution, but it's not perfect. Using a joystick is a lot better.
Yeah.
So
Right. So for any fast-paced game, for sure, the controller is absolutely necessary. And I would imagine any game that's going to present you with multiple options of how to use something, you're going to need the controller as well.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Bad, or you're going to have 100 menus pop up that you're going to have to be pointing at with your
Right.
fingers.
No.
Or, you know,
You
I
will
can't see
have to
that.
learn finger tutting, just like on the TV show The Magicians.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Or we could all learn American Sign Language and just spell our commands like we're
Yep,
typing.
yep. I already know that. I have an advantage.
I was
Take
going to
sword.
say, right.
Go, I want to.
Yes, except if you're communicating in game, by the time you've communicated, he's behind you, he has killed you. And, you know,
Well, it would have to be a turn-based.
Yeah.
We could end up full circle back to Zork
Yeah.
and VR.
Turn-based
Look left.
first-person shooter.
Yeah, exactly.
Forward, west.
Kill troll with sword. Yeah.
I never did get into the house on Zork, but I blame that on my having a pirated copy when I was a kid. A floppy disk borrowed from a friend, and so I didn't have the actual instructions and didn't know anything. I had to try to figure it all out myself.
It's a hard game.
Yes.
It was. I mean, if I think back to Zork, there were no clues, there were
Right.
no hints. It was just basically forward. Oh, there's a mailbox. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, okay.
Yeah. And I have always regretted the fact that I have never been eaten by a grue.
Yeah, you haven't lived unless you've died to a grue.
Yeah.
Well, if you get eaten by a head crab, it's close, but you know.
I have not been eaten
like the same.
by a head crab. I've been hurt by a head crab, but and I managed to escape from them all without lying down on the floor and doing a flip.
Oh, I want to ask you a question about the flying mount. Pardon me, from the
Sure.
crab just reminded me. Are you going to have sky battles as well, or is it?
There will be some form of aerial battles. I don't know if it's going to involve the flying mounts or if it'll only be airship to airship. That's one of those things that's mentioned in the Kickstarter and made me say, wait, what?
Yeah, it just made me say, okay, I think I'm joining the Kickstarter.
Yeah, it sounds neat. The flying mounts may be limited in altitude. We may have to for technical reasons. So to go higher than that, you may have to take an airship, and then it's more like a naval battle, but in the sky.
Right.
So it'll involve, just flying past each other and firing cannons or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but still to be able to add that into the world, I mean, I got a taste of what an MMORPG has been so far by playing Orbis.
Yeah.
And I have to say Orbis was definitely less than satisfying. It fulfilled an itch, but it wasn't the end all and begin all. And it looks like Ilysia really has taken a much more graphically beautiful stance. And from just the things that you're mentioning, it's adding a whole different dimension to the genre.
Yeah, the artists on the team are really amazing. And all the work they do is beautiful. And they're also, reasonably good at making it efficient while still being beautiful, which is so critical for a game like this.
And very challenging, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the real challenge. Anyone can make something look good, but to make it look good well, that's not true. I can't. Any artist can make something look good, but to make it look good and perform well, that's a real talent.
Right. Yeah, to combine the beauty of it with actually loading on time and having people perceive it, and multiple people perceive it. And I guess that's why I'm still in awe of VR in use. I remember having my Virtual Boy, and I remember, dreaming about this forever. and it keeps coming closer to the dream. And you are moving it forward. I mean, you're one of the guys that are coming up with these new techniques that are going to change the entire platform so that other people will be able to join it and have fun with it right away, as opposed to being early adopters.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably, I would say, about the third time that VR has the third wave of VR.
Right.
There was the early one, with the Virtual Boy, and then there was, remember the arcade machine that you could look like this with your head up to it.
Yep.
I think so.
Yeah, and there was a couple of previous times where Breathless Reports said VR is here and it's amazing, and it wasn't amazing, and it didn't stick around. But this time is different. I think that the hardware technology is finally there.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. People who haven't tried it don't get it, and then when they finally try it, they're like, "Oh, now I see."
Yeah, it's that big that aha moment.
Yeah.
But I remember
that's
playing.
why I am always surprised that there aren't more demos out there. I mean, I know right now the COVID and can't share headsets and they're hard to clean and whatnot, but that's not going to always to be the case. And if it wasn't the case before now, and they had almost no demos out there. Back in the early days, I had to literally hunt down a demo.
Well, Oculus's big idea was make it cheap enough to be a Christmas present.
Yeah.
And
be an buy,
right before that, you had to invest, real money in order to get a VR setup.
Oh yeah, a few years ago you were in $2,500 before you were even touching the reality. And now, like Josh and I were talking earlier today, and for $50 more than the introduction of the Go is the lower priced Quest 2 in 2 years. So that's quite the advance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it may not be quite the full-fledged Quest 2 that everybody wants, and maybe more of a 1.7 or so, but there's still enough of an improvement that is so significant.
Yeah. I remember it was a couple of years ago now, I guess. We had some family over for the holidays, and I let them try my Go, and they played Quiver Vanguard, and they played Beatron, of course, and they also played
two of the best games on the platform.
I think so. And they played, the Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, and a few other things. And they all had so much fun that I think most of those relatives went home and bought their own Go, like within the week, because they just were blown away by how different it is from anything else. And this includes, I'm thinking right now of my sister-in-law, who is not a gamer. She's never, she plays a lot of board games, but she's never been into computer games. But she loved the Go, and she and her family, play it routinely. And I think they've just ordered the Quest, or they switched from Go to Quest recently.
Okay.
And then probably was disappointed to learn that the Quest 2 is coming out right after that.
I would imagine everybody that was thrilled a month ago is not thrilled right now.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, the point is, VR is amazing.
Yeah. And contrary to all the people who say VR is dead, it's not.
Yeah.
But, I was thinking about that second wave that you had mentioned, which Disney really had put a lot into, which is why I'm surprised that it never took off. I remember flying through Aqaba on the, Aladdin's carpet and going into basically virtual Disney, which his son had set up, Quest. It was called Disney Quest. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And they were like pop-up buildings, like a Dave and Buster, but everything in them was a virtual ride.
Yeah.
So, and how that never took off, I don't know either. So it's.
Yeah, I mean, there are still VR arcades in some places. I went to one in Japan just a year and a half ago, and I think that there are some in Las Vegas now. And they're pretty fancy team experiences with 8 of you all, attacking the Empire together or something. I haven't tried that, but yeah, they're not as common as you might think.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if having arcade experience kind of gives the impression that this isn't a for home type of the thing. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Because
Yeah.
so most people who go to an arcade don't go out and buy a pinball machine and bring it
Right.
home. Yeah.
Good point.
My parents did. So.
Some people do, yes, but most don't. Most don't go out and buy Ms. Pac-Man and bring it home.
That's a
I
fair point.
know I have a genetic predisposition towards buying the shiny, flashy thing. And, okay. Anyway, back to Ilysia for a second here. I've noticed that the graphics seem to have improved tremendously from when the company first started advertising it until now. It just seems like a whole lot is going into the artwork.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well, even though I've only been in like I want to say 4 of the Kickstarter alpha thing, because I don't always have the time, unfortunately, to be able to do
I understand that. Yeah.
And there have been some issues with the timing before where, okay, Saturday, no Sunday, no Monday.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It was a real scramble.
there's been a progression in the quality as well. It's just getting better and better.
Yeah. 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 As I said before, the artists are amazing, and they've really embraced, the constraints of the hardware.
Yeah.
While still creating their vision.
Yeah.
Is there a lot
I
of
can't wait
down
to see what it looks like on the Quest 2 with the higher resolution.
I'm sorry, what was that, Brad?
Sorry, go ahead, Brad.
Is there going to be a lot of dumbing down on the Quest as compared to the PC VR with this? Or?
I don't think so. The differences will be probably lower texture resolution in some places because we're limited on texture RAM. And there may be some decorative bits that are just omitted on Quest, ground cover plants and, extra vines on some of the walls that aren't climbable, but are just, strictly decoration. Those sorts of things we can mark PC only. Although I'm actually going to encourage a switch to thinking of it in terms of quality levels, because somebody might be on a lower end PC and also want to turn those things off.
Yeah,
in order to keep the frame rate up.
Yeah.
But that's only the only real difference. It'll be, all the same environments, the same skybox, same character models, same meshes. If we have to turn down anything, it'll just be texture resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I think Brad and I both had in mind about that is in Orbis, PC users who have the high quality mounts on Quest, you can't see the mounts.
Really?
Yeah. And in older versions of Alt Space, there were things that PC users could see that the Quest users could not see. Not even a lower resolution version of it, they couldn't see it. So
yeah, well, like I said,
that big of a divide.
There may be some things like that, but they'll be, they'll just be window dressing.
Right.
It won't be anything that you can interact with or that has any impact on the game.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's just something that we always look at because every now and then we get blown away by some graphics on Quest, like in games like Red Matter or Moss, where it seems that like, what did they do here that nobody else seems to be able to manage?
Yeah. And I bet you in most cases they're controlling your viewpoint to some degrry because
Moss for sure.
Well, in Red Matter, I think there might be a little bit of that going on, but in Moss, you can literally move around everywhere in the environment if you still got the room for it. Red Matter, I think one of their biggest secrets is it's a single player game.
Oh yeah, that helps.
Without anything else.
That makes a lot of things easier.
Yeah. I would imagine that has to be that has to seem like super easy compared to multiplayer games.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And then when you get into the multi-mega player games, it's just, I could see why you're going to need to do that load testing quite a bit. Every time you come up with something great, it's going to have to be load tested to make sure it's not going to bring down the game.
Right.
Well, again with Solaris, that happened to me 3 times. It not only crashed the game, but my headset.
Oh, ouch.
Mhm.
Yeah, on a curated game. So
That's surprising.
Yeah.
Certainly surprised me. I did not. I expect a crash or a bug every now and then, but not the headset. If you're
Right.
bringing down the whole headset, that's pretty major bug right there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that happens in Onward every now and then too, but I think what that mostly is the Quest running a little bit low on memory and whatnot. The Quest itself needing to do a reboot to fix things.
Yeah.
Not so
for
much
curated
the game itself, but the resources of the Quest got too limited for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So did you hold back any on the development at all because of the Quest, as opposed to going crazy with just like a PC VR approach?
I don't think so. Our approach is generally to build first for the Quest and then add Pretty for the PC VR version.
Okay, that
Additional
was
decorations
exactly,
and so on. So
yeah, you got exactly to what I was asking, because that seems
That's
to
the right
be
way to do it, in my opinion, rather than
Right.
putting at the PC and then dumbing down.
and you try to scale it back, that's really hard to do well.
Yeah.
Or it's easy to take something that's already running well and just throw in more decorations,
Right.
for the higher, more powerful PC.
Right.
And I would imagine you'd be expecting a lot of your user base to come from Quest, being that it's a much less expensive way to jump into VR than the PC is.
Yeah, although I don't know what the stats are. I mean, I know there are still a lot of PC VR users out there. It'd be interesting to actually get some numbers, but I don't have those handy.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the numbers are pointing, well, anyway, the recent numbers are pointed towards Quest use coming in there and really influencing a lot of your purchases.
Yeah, it may not be number one yet, but it's certainly climbing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can believe it.
But
I mean, I have
that,
I was going to say, I have, my objections with Facebook as a company, but boy, Oculus makes good hardware.
Yep.
right. Oh, and I agree with you on both those counts. So,
Yep.
yeah, the Facebook takeover, or Facebox, as we now like to call Oculus, has become disturbing, to say the least. And they just created a controversy where none should have existed at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I can see some of the arguments people are putting up in the defense of them. Like, well, you wouldn't expect to be able to use an Xbox without a Microsoft account, but they never said that you could, whereas Oculus did.
Right.
Yeah, when you make a promise and a guarantee, and then a couple of years later, it was like, only kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, ooh, okay. So yeah, I know a lot of people that are a little bit hesitant to jump into the two, not because of the quality or any of the other things, but because it's tied to Facebook. And a lot of the magazines have, in their reviews, mentioned the fact that yes, you are getting the unit for less money, but they're getting your data for a lot less as well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But I am looking forward to more of these. I guess the genres, seeing them expand is really nice. That is really nice. So, and right now, you guys are really in the lead, I think, as far as the
MMORPG.
Yeah, seems like it. I mean, there's certainly some competition.
Yeah.
But
the competition, to an extent, in ways, is good. It just
keeps us all sharp.
Quality.
Yep. That's
Although, as you had mentioned earlier, I think a lot of them are not really mega multiplayer yet at this point, and they're just sort of, even if you get 10 to 15 people, it's like a mega multiplayer at this point on the Quest. So I know probably the one you were just
thinking of is the one that's kind of the anime look, right? And how it's a multiplayer, but it's not a massively multiplayer one. It's like 10 or 15 people or something like that. And it looks good. It had a little bit of a rocky start, but it's gotten better, I've heard, and it looks good. But yeah, it's not a massively multiplayer one.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you have to be careful using that MM
Right.
for your ORPG.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, we can't wait to see it come out. So, and now that I know you have aerial battles that are coming up and flying mounts, I've become a lot more interested.
Okay.
What I'd like to know is if you're fighting a dragon and you have a mount and someone else is on the ground, that could be a thing. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe.
Or flying mount to flying mount battle.
Well,
That's what Brad
it's
was
not-
asking about earlier, and yeah, I don't know about that. That would be harder than the ship-to-ship battle.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get it in, or maybe it won't make it for the initial release, but it'll come, in a later update.
Right.
But it's sort of interesting when you talk about it being a 3 by 3 kilometer area that you're working on. It's really not, because it's 3 by 3 by
by something.
Exactly. That has yet to be determined.
That's right. Yep. And you can go down underwater as well.
Yeah.
And underground, of course.
Yeah.
So,
I killed a hermit crab underwater.
Oh, well done.
Yeah. And
They're pretty easy. But
yeah, said to open it.
Good. Yeah. Yeah,
I
it's
felt
very
bad killing
satisfying.
the hermit crab, though. I'm like,
I was going
you're so cute. I don't want to kill you.
You're no longer a hero in my eyes.
Well, the original plan was to have a mermaid down there give you a little quest, collect 5 hermit crab shells so I can build a new seashell bikini or something. But that ended up getting scrapped before the Kickstarter trailer was shot, because they just didn't have time to animate the mermaid.
Right. I saw the mermaid a couple times.
Yeah, she was in there, and then she
to Ariel.
yeah.
Um,
It's a classic look.
Yeah, that reminds me though. One of the things that I like and I don't like about Orbis is it's got quests and it talks about rebuilding things and whatnot, but then the actual environment doesn't actually change. If there are quests in Ilysia that involve things that should, in reality, cause a new building or a change in the appearance of a building, is that going to happen?
Yeah, it is. This is something we've talked about. Because I come from sort of an old school online RPG model where I want to, I came to it thinking everyone should see the same world. Yeah. And so if there's going to be something like that, then it's going to mean a change that everybody can see. But that doesn't really work for the modern RPG gamer, because everybody wants to go through that quest line and fix that building themselves. So that's what we're going to do. And those things will be instanced such that you and I may not see the same thing, because you've completed that quest and I haven't.
Right.
And that's just, a little quirk of the world that, to some extent it breaks immersion, but players are so used to that by now that I think everybody's okay with it.
Yeah, and it's just something that kind of is necessary, because otherwise they're going to have one-off quests that once they're done, no one else can do them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's how we're going to handle that. And in those cases, 2 players will, possibly see something different based on which quests they've completed.
Right.
Oh, that could be pretty bizarre. That's interesting.
Oh,
yeah.
I was in the VR chat world a couple weeks ago, based on the Final Fantasy 13, I think. And one of the quests that you can get is find all the Cactuar logos around the world. Well, if you have not activated that quest, you can't see the logo. But someone who has activated that quest can.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so similar, right? Yep. I just got taken aback when you said Final Fantasy 13, and I'm thinking, after Final Fantasy 1, doesn't everything becomes sort of redundant.
Turns out it wasn't so final.
Yeah, exactly. I think we have to go back into almost Final Fantasy.
Well,
Yeah.
Getting to
I'm not
closer to
entirely
the
sure of the lore, but I kind of get the impression they're all like different world and like different reimaginings of the same general kind of story.
I'm no expert on that either.
I
I
was going
don't
to say,
know.
that's very nice of you, Josh. You put that together for them so now they can create their canon.
No.
Are you guys creating a lore for Ilysia that
Oh, yeah.
you're working off of? Okay, that's...
Yeah, we have one person in particular who's kind of in charge of the lore and the writing. She's a good writer and a voracious reader, so she has a lot of background material to draw on for inspiration. And she's been working on that. It's a really interesting backstory. Some of it is on the Kickstarter page. I think there's a lot more that is not there because it'll be revealed through the course of playing the game.
Yeah. We don't necessarily want the entire story overshared on the Kickstarter page.
Yeah.
We want to explore and discover that, yes.
Yeah.
Right. But it's always better to have the lore in place as you're building the game, as opposed to later on, like, oh, you know what would have been great if we would have.
Right. But for example, one of the neat things about the lore is it's a double planet system. Ilysia is the world that you're on, and then there's this older or the world that used to be inhabited by humans called Lagina, which is now destroyed. And when you look up in the sky, you can see it, a destroyed planet up there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Some of the pieces are the Sky Island that are mentioned in the Kickstarter tiers. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's this whole backstory about, what happened there and why are the humans now on Ilysia and how did the other races of Ilysia react to the humans being here and so on. It's pretty interesting.
I was going to say, that does sound very cool. All of a sudden, science fiction story that I'm interested in reading that as well.
Yeah, you could look at it that way. Or it makes me think of the, now I'm drawing a blank. There's a way in Dungeons and Dragons that there's a sort of a spacefaring component to it, but it's all magic based. Now it's on the tip of your tongue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like Rift or something like
that. Spellbinders.
Okay.
Something. Anyway, it's similar to that, I think. There is technology in Ilysia, but it's relatively low tech, like muskets at most. But Spelljammer. That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway. But enough D&D. Anyway, so I actually don't know how Laginans managed to travel between the worlds, but I imagine it involved some sort of magical transport.
Yes.
Some Deus Ex Machina will end up coming in and saving the day.
Sure.
Maybe they rode dragons.
Maybe.
You're really hung up on those dragons, Josh. I don't know.
I'll tell you, there's so they've changed the Kickstarter.
I've been killing dragons.
They've changed the Kickstarter trailer a couple of times over the course of the campaign. The original one was entirely filmed with us on the team running around in the game and just filming on our headsets or with screen recording on PC. And there's a scene at the end, where we look up and we see the Titan, and then somebody says, "Blow the summoner horn," and he blows the horn. And the dragon comes in and lands right next to us. And now that was all, scripted. That dragon is landing every, 40 seconds. But it was still pretty amazing, as we're standing here and this big dragon, you see him come out of the sky near the sun, so he's kind of backlit, and then he just comes down and whoop right next to you and roars. It was cool. And if we can bring any of that to the real game, and I think we will, it's going to be a moment that you tell your friends about for sure.
Yeah, I think that is what makes those games up, or those moments that you just, completely leave the real world behind completely and just relish that victory that you have.
Right.
So it's great. And it's missing from other multiplayer games at this point. They just seem to be grinding and repetition, whereas this seems to be a true open world.
Yeah, that's the danger with the RPG is a lot of them sort of become just like daily lists of chores, odd jobs you do for NPCs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we'll have
going back to Orbis, unfortunately, you had to keep re-getting the same quest that you'd already done just to level up faster. Which, take its old. And that's one thing that I did not like about the Final Fantasy games is I hated having to go into the overworld and just grind fighting the same monsters over and over again. I wanted the story progression. I didn't want to just grind through battle after battle after battle and fighting cactuars and whatnot over and over again,
Yeah.
So
no matter what people think, nobody does. I remember at one point early on in the video games, I was talking to somebody and I was talking about Final Fantasy and said something about probably about 2/3 of the way through the game. And this person said, yeah, me too. And I said, really? How did you find the robot? And, robot? Well, yeah, to get the spaceship going. Spaceship? Okay, you're not 2/3 of the way through the game. You're about 5% of the way in. So we'll speak at another time.
Yeah.
But that's always that. It seems like a hard balance to achieve. Is you want a leveling system, and you don't want people to be able to just not do anything leveling up and go all the way through, but you don't want to go too much the other way either. So
so we're hoping to come up with more creative quests that aren't just go kill 5 of this thing or gather me 20 mushrooms or something like that. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of that, but we're going to try and minimize those and have more interesting ones where you feel like you're actually impacting some NPC's life.
Right.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Impacting some NPC's life.
Yeah.
Just don't think about it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I was going to say, it's getting about dinner time over here where I am, so I want to wrap things up soon. But one last thing before I do, that's one of the things that I do like about Skyrim, even though it comes from the PC world, then it's got menus and button clicks and all that.
Sure.
Most of the quests in there are not really repetitive. You feel like you are entering in a minor story arc and you are helping someone out in their story.
Right.
Rather than just wander the overworld, look for a monster to attack.
Right.
So it keeps you engrossed in it more because it's more natural to get involved in a story than random monster encounter.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're going to be striving for. And the story writer I mentioned earlier has been thinking hard about lots of interesting quest lines.
Yes.
Great. It sounds like a real game.
Yes. Imagine that. Real game.
I have to try to imagine real game for a while.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that you are working on it because
Yeah.
of the work that you've done prior, which has shown us that this game can go somewhere.
Yeah.
And
As
the
soon
fact
as
that
we found
you're
out you
still
were on the
proud of it.
team, that's one of the reasons Michael and I went and joined on the pre-Kickstarter. We're like, oh, if Joe's involved, it's going to become real.
Well, great. I appreciate the vote of confidence.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Okay.
Now get to work on those sky mounts and get us a little more altitude.
Okay.
Let me see you just a little bigger. And I guess we'll let you go. We'll let Josh eat. And we thank you for your time. Really.
Yeah.
All right. I was happy to be here.
Great talking with you. A great interview. The best of luck on your game, and just keep it posted.
All right. Will do.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.